Loading. Welcome to Access the Animus.
Hello everyone and welcome to a new video here on Access the Animus. Today we're sharing our story analysis of part 2 of the Mastery Challenge game mode and quest for Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where we're going to have a look at the conclusion and final revelations about the stories of the old lady Hildiran and her ancestor, the Valkyrie / Isu warrior Hildr, that worked for Odin and Freyia until she found out about their plan to save themselves from the Toba Catastrophe. We're also going to discuss Eivor's never-ending quest to be none the wiser about who she really is, while also delving into the final secret documents that do provide some interesting explanations on the magic-like elements of the quest and a new perspective on the story while still being very much tied to the established lore. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking it, subscribing to our channel and turning the notifications on so you won't miss any of our future updates. And with that out of the way, let's dive into our story analysis of part 2 of the Mastery Challenge game mode. So we left off part 1 of the Mastery Challenge story back in June 2021 with this old lady Hildiran reaching Ravensthorpe while a meteor hit one of the hills surrounding the village, and this lady worked with Eivor in order to open the so-called Freyja's Gate, which was located at the crash site, through the use of an amulet / piece of first civilization technology that allowed users to enter a virtual or alternate reality form of training that happened only in their mind, called battle meditation, which is how we are seeing the challenges themselves in this mode. In order to open the gate, Eivor had to power the artifact by reaching a number of Freyja shrines across England and completing various challenges / battle meditation sessions, and when she did, she went back to Ravensthorpe and finally opened the gate so that she and Hildiran could enter a small Isu vault or shrine where the two found a so-called Odin's Eye, a first civilization artifact that Hildiran believed to act as a compass towards their next location in their quest to find the equally so-called Odin's Vault that was bound to contain a Valkyrie armor. The quest ended with Hildiran behaving like a cartoonishly evil villain and Eivor feeling used but still giving her the Odin's Eye artifact because look, I don't know why, okay? Anyway, in that shrine, there was also a number of documents that very much hinted at the fact that Hildiran was the descendant of an Isu called Hildr, who was one of the Valkyries, that is a group of personal guards of the Isu Odin, and was also a master of this battle meditation / alternate reality technique, but who at some point, because of a then unspecified betrayal that she had experienced, she decided to defect and then incurred in Odin's wrath and was then stripped of her title and Valkyrie armor, which was supposed to have been relocated to Odin's personal vault. According to part 1, Hildr was then quote-unquote made mortal and banished to wander Midgard, which we originally interpreted as somehow becoming a human, but the story shown in part 2 does not seem to point towards that direction and actually seems to have forgotten that specific bit. After that, Hildr was also caged in one of the prisons created by Odin that we saw in part 1 of the Tombs of the Fallen activity, in the ice location that contained the tomb of Venustius, but before that, she was able to at least have one child who led to several more descendants like Hildiran was in the 9th century CE, who were all able to see glimpses of their Isu ancestor's life and were thus planning to take revenge on Odin, or more likely his reincarnation, whom they were hoping to find thanks to the amulet, then called Freyja's Medallion, which in turn was bound to detect Odin's DNA's presence, which is why Hildiran eventually found Eivor and started their quest. So that's where we left off, and I'd love to say that we pick up from there, but already at the start, after using and deceiving Eivor to finally put her hands on the Odin's Eye artifact, Hildiran gives it back to her immediately, telling her that it will make a sound, it will sing when it gets closer to Odin's vault, and while that seems a conflicting behavior by Hildiran, it's also kind of justified, as in she knows exactly where Eivor has to go next. She knows that Odin's vault is located in East Anglia, meaning that she tried already to go there on her own, but couldn't access the inner chambers. The vault is indeed located in East Anglia under Dunwich Castle, and when Eivor gets close to the location, the artifact indeed makes a sound that gets stronger when Eivor finds the entrance and then goes inside the empty chamber to the vault, which is filled with Isu architecture. So in there, Eivor finds a similar door to the Freyja's gate from part 1 of this quest, but this time the amulet isn't able to open it, and thus Hildiran once again appears to direct our main character. But why did she tell Eivor to go alone if she was meant to be there as well? Anyway, as in part 1 of the Mastery Challenge quest, Hildiran is there to direct Eivor so that she herself can get beyond the door, and here she asks for the amulet again, which she calls the Amulet of Freyja, hinting that this piece of Isu technology did belong to the Isu Freyja, and there she cryptically says that the amulet was charged with enough energy from the first set of challenges to enter the Freyja shrine in front of Ravensthorpe, but it wasn't charged enough to enter Odin's vault, as if Odin decided to add a stronger security level to enter his own property. And thus Eivor sets to find more Freyja shrines to do more battle meditation sessions in order to charge Freyja's amulet, but Hildiran tells her to also keep the Odin's Eye artifact because quote-unquote there may be other hidden playthings of the gods, meaning that there might be some more first civilization technology that the artifact might detect in the world, but if I'm not mistaken, within this quest specifically, the artifact doesn't react to anything else, so instead the artifact might actually come into play into another free piece of content, like part 2 of the Tombs of the Fallen activity, as we'll see later. So Eivor completes all the challenges, powering up the Amulet of Freyja, and then gets back to Odin's vault, where she finally is able to open the door and to finally see the Valkyrie armor that Hildiran mentioned and that belonged to the Isu Hildr, which, well, looked as a reskin of the Valkyrie armor set from the Helix store, though the armor that can be obtained at the end of the quest is quite different. Anyway, Eivor tries to get closer to the armor, but of course, now that our very gullible main character has opened the door for her, Hildiran can finally, or should I say once again, show her true allegiance and thus hits Eivor in order to finally get hold of the armor that belonged to her Isu ancestor Hildr, which has no Isu element on it and is actually oriented towards the Valkyrie iconography of the Norse mythology, but at least it has some Norse runes painted on it, which translated from the Elder Futhark alphabet read as Ragnarok, which may be just a random line placed on the outfit by the artists, but it also has a tiny connection to Hildr's story, as we'll see later. Anyway, Eivor, again surprised in front of the obvious, asks why Hildiran hit her, to which she replies that she is seeking vengeance, and that's where the amulet activates, not only creating the illusion of flames and even Hildiran flying, but later conjuring up 3 new battle meditation locations in Eivor's and Hildiran's minds. That's where the two of them fight and where Eivor is tested in 3 more challenges, but while playing those, Eivor and the player can get some more direct information about Hildiran's thirst for vengeance and Hildr's backstory. For example, we get more confirmation as to how all the generation of Hildr's descendants sought Odin, or more specifically Odin's reincarnation, and that's because back in the Isu era, Odin, here called the One-Eyed, did spill their progenitor Hildr's blood. In these dialogues we also see some more signs of Eivor once again not understanding anything of what is happening around her, as she asks why they are talking about Valkyries, and here Hildiran tries to be even clearer and more direct by stating that Hildr was betrayed by Freyja and imprisoned by Odin during the Isu times, but even that does not help. Hildiran even adds that after being betrayed, the Isu Hildr was locked in the prison of ice, where she then died of starvation after Ragnarok, which, translated, confirms that Odin indeed imprisoned Hildr in the jail that we saw in the Tombs of the Fallen activity within the iced cave that contained Venutsius' tomb, but more than that, we now know that by staying in that prison, Hildr survived the Toba Catastrophe, even though she eventually died of starvation. In another dialogue, Hildiran adds that her mother told her the tale, that is, the tale of what happened to their Isu ancestor Hildr and how she was betrayed, stripped of her Valkyrie title and imprisoned by Odin, and she also told her about how to use the amulet, the reference being to Freyja's amulet, which would have been instrumental in her plan to defeat Odin, as we'll see later. But of course Eivor can't make sense of these hints either. Eventually, Eivor defeats Hildiran, and apparently while they fought in the illusionary world of the battle meditation, they also fought in the real world. So we're back in Odin's vault, and once again our slowpoke Eivor asks why they fought, and this leads to the finale of the quest, the final explanation, and one of the weirdest endings I could expect for this kind of content. Hildiran can't be more direct with this. She explains the full story bit by bit to Eivor. She tells her that she is the most recent descendant of several generations of women that led back to her ancestor Hildr from a long time prior to that, from the Isu era as we know it, and apparently she was Freyja's lover. But when Odin, who, let's remember, is established in Dawn of Ragnarok to have married Freyja out of the convenience of ending a war with the so-called Vanir, and who was almost ready to trade her in exchange for her protection from the Toba Catastrophe by a Greco-Roman Isu spy, when that same Odin found out about Hildr and Freyja, he burned with jealousy, and thus he threw Hildr in the prison we discussed earlier, and apparently Hildr stayed in there for years, up until the Toba Catastrophe and beyond, where she died of starvation. And while she was Freyja's lover originally, all she had left of that was the amulet, Freyja's amulet, which we are going to later learn that it was given to Hildr by Freyja herself, and it was that amulet that was passed on from generation to generation of Hildr descendants who vowed to take vengeance on Odin for everything that he did to their ancestor during the Isu era. And then, in possibly the worst moment of the story, after being directly told all of that, Eivor smirks and says, "You take me for Odin," which once again shows that she is absolutely none the wiser, or just a little bit wiser as to who she really is after 1.5 years of content. But that's not all, because after Eivor has shown multiple times to not being able to catch on, to not make sense of the hints, to be a slowpoke and almost dumb at times, that is where Hildiran says that Eivor is a very wise character, and thus she pledges to her. Honestly, I can't think of a wronger moment to tell Eivor that she is wise than this, but I guess this is what we're getting now. Eivor even closes up showing how slow she is on this by diminishing Hildiran's tale to the ramblings of a drunken woman, so yeah, I guess that's what we're going for here. But that's not the end of it, cause Hildiran turns to look down at her feet and sees an artifact that is exactly the same as the ones that could be found in the Tombs of the Fallen activity, and that caused Eivor to pronounce the 3 Isu language words that we analyzed back in November. Here we see Hildiran describing them as beacons, without going into much details, and then destroying it because there's no use for it anymore. So we can imagine that these artifacts were left in the various vaults in England by Odin, Freyja, and maybe other Asgardian Isu in order for them or other Isu to be able to find their locations, possibly working along with the Odin's Eye artifact, which did indeed emit some specific sounds when it was close to the gate of Odin's vault. So maybe that's what Hildiran meant when she said that there might be other hidden playthings of the gods that Eivor could find through the use of the Odin's Eye artifact, and thus we might see her using it again in part 2 of the Tombs of the Fallen activity. But in our recent videos, I've seen that some of you had varying opinions on what these tomb artifacts might be a beacon for, so do let me know in the comments what you think their purpose is. I'm pretty curious. So Eivor and Hildiran go back to the settlement, and eventually our main character obtains Hildr's Valkyrie armor, and thus the main story is over. But there's still something interesting to discuss here. That is a set of 3 documents that do explain the full story and fill in some of the gaps even from the first part of the Mastery Challenge quest. The first one plays right into one of the dialogues that we saw earlier and is written by Hildiran's mother for her daughter, presumably not too long before her death. This is seemingly where she passed on to Hildiran the duty that all of Hildr's descendants had, that is, getting revenge on Odin, but this is also the actual document where she explained to Hildiran what really happened to their long-gone ancestor. Hildr was apparently working as a quote-unquote Valkyrie for the goddess Freyja, though the first part of the quest implied that she was actually working for Odin, but whatever the case, because she was working for either of them, she learned of Odin's plan to save himself and the other Asgardian Isu connected to him from the upcoming Toba Catastrophe through the use of the 7th method of salvation. Thus, furious because Odin was only trying to save himself and his friends from the catastrophe, leaving everyone else to die, Hildr decided to rally all the other Isu working as guards for Odin and Freyja, here called Valkyries, in order to attack him. So finally we get why Hildr defected from her duty and turned against her master, and how she plotted to presumably kill him, but apparently she must have confided her plan to her secret lover, the Isu Freyja, who, possibly believing that it was going to be a dangerous rebellion, or maybe selfishly believing that Odin was her free pass to survive the Toba Catastrophe, eventually betrayed her and told Odin everything about her plans. So Odin squashed the rebellious Valkyries and captured Hildr, sentencing her to be imprisoned for years and eventually to die by starvation. But before that happened, a distraught Freyja apparently arranged to send her illusion-based artifact, her Amulet, to Hildr herself as a token of past love. Hildr suffered because of this gesture and later had the amulet sent to her own daughter, presumably before the catastrophe hit the earth, and that's where the decision to exact vengeance on Odin or his reincarnation started. The amulet was meant to be passed on for generations because each of the descendants knew that Odin was bound to be reborn at some point, and thus they would have been ready to use it on his reincarnation and to finally get their revenge after thousands of years. And that's how that amulet eventually ended up in Hildiran's hands. The second document plays into that, and it's written by Hildiran herself while she is studying the Freyja artifact passed down to her by her mother, possibly after she died, and that's where she finally decides to believe the story about her ancestor Hildr, and thus decides to search for any manifestation of Odin's reincarnation during her time. During her research though, Hildiran stumbles upon the Freyja shrines located all across England, and here is where the document presents a justification as to how the shrines work. That is, that these shrines too are pieces of Isu tech, as they contain the same metal that Freyja's amulet is made up of. So that's how these two pieces of Isu tech can seemingly commune, and how the amulet gets powered while the user is interacting with them, which is what we see when Eivor participates in the challenges. And yeah, it doesn't really make sense that the shrines, along with the armor itself, are very much shaped like the visual representations of the Valkyries from the Norse mythology, while they're actually Isu craft. Anyway, by testing and powering up the amulet at the shrines, Hildiran found out that it had some strong illusionary powers, so at last we also get a proper explanation about what this artifact does, that is creating illusions, very much like other Isu artifacts like the apples and staves of Eden, and this goes on to justify why the battle meditation sessions do only happen in the user's mind, while also acting like a form of training for them. In her research, Hildiran also found that the artifact's illusionary powers were bolstered when it interacted with the various shrines, so much so that it could even create an illusion of an entire event taking place only in the target's mind, which Hildiran actually went on to perform, as we'll see later. The third document is again written by Hildiran, and it dates before she got to Ravensthorpe. Knowing already about what Odin did during the Isu era, like many generations of her ancestors before her, she took to search far and wide to see whether the reincarnated version of Odin had been born during her time, and in this document she recorded catching wind of a noteworthy Norse warrior capable of doing legendary things. Of course we're talking about Eivor here, that could indeed be Odin's reincarnation, and when she found her, she described her in her journals as credulous in nature, to the point that she could trick her into believing anything she wanted. So much for Eivor being a wise character, huh? So that's what Hildiran decided to do, and she was helped in all of this by the Amulet of Freyja itself, and one of the illusions created by that artifact was the meteor that we saw at the start of the mission, which actually never happened but was good enough to gain Eivor's attention as planned. So that's how Hildiran actually got Eivor's trust and set herself on finding her ancestor's armor, while also planning to get her vengeance on Odin's reincarnation, even though that resulted in pledging her allegiance to Eivor and describing her as wise, while she in turn called her a drunken mad woman. And that was it for our analysis of the conclusion of the Mastery Challenge quest. What were your reactions about its story and ending? Do you think that Eivor was really a wise character here? And did you enjoy the ties between Hildr's story and the wider narrative established in the main game? I honestly appreciated the connection to Odin's use of the 7 method, considering how determined but very selfish were his actions aimed at saving himself and his friends. And if you don't remember what he did, we do have a proper video here analyzing his motivations and the consequences of his actions. So once again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in our next video.